item number 2. Hang on one second. I can hear myself through this monitor. Does anybody know how to turn that down?
I think it's the other speakers, the other mics you're hearing. Shouldn't be through your own mic.
No, it's through this TV monitor. Thanks.
It's a new system.
Thank you. All right, I'll move ahead. Agenda number 2, the consent agenda for personnel, substitute staffing and for the February report, and field trips. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none or hearing none, we'll adopt the consent agenda as is. And McMahon students can have fun and enjoy their experience at the New England Aquarium in Boston, so have fun there. We'll have 96 students and 15 adults going to that trip soon. Moving ahead to item number 3, an announcement of certificate of appreciation. This will be presented by myself, Bill Webster, and Jana Mates, the Lewiston Middle School principal. And where is she? There she is. All right, do you have I do. Yeah, it's good. We'll just
add the team to come up, not just me. Just with us.
I'm going to put this over
Sure.
here. So. I think we should do it over there. Perfect. Podium.
Okay. I think that sometimes in sort of this whole process of figuring out what's best for kids, especially when it comes to teaching and learning, we forget about the other pieces, the social, emotional, and supporting kids and supporting staff to make sure that the morale in our building is where it should be. And in saying that, I think sometimes we have staff that are either underappreciated or go a little bit unnoticed. And so tonight I wanted to publicly recognize Jordan Barabee, who's our head custodian and probably one of the coolest guys that I know. So thank you for showing up at work every day and being positive. So.
All right, moving ahead to item number 4, public input. Tonight, we begin our lengthy budget review process. In the interest of time, I have decided to remove certain items from the agenda since we just had a regular board meeting last week. Tonight, there will be no public comment on non-agenda items. Public comment will only be permitted on agenda items listed and subject to time restrictions. So thank you for that. Agenda number 5. To receive reports from subcommittees and the legislative liaisons.
Do you want to just tell people that you let them speak on PPO prior?
No, we'll get to that. So the first subcommittee is the facilities subcommittee. This will be presented by Luke Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we met today. Our second meeting is the new facilities subcommittee. A 3-item agenda. We'll kind of go out of order, not necessarily chronologically, excuse me. We talked about enrollment projections in the school district. Some things to note. LHS is scheduled to come to capacity in the next few years here. With the new program that we'll be creating at Longley, that should alleviate that crowding itself. Fit about 200 students in the program. That should drop it to levels that it's about at right now. And that also doesn't consider the possible creation of the Visual and Performing Arts Center, which would also reduce class sizes further, overcrowding at the high school. So that should really help out. Also, middle school enrollments projected to peak in 2019, and then it shouldn't hit that high number again for at least not the near future. So that will be good. Those were some of the main points I had. If anybody's interested, they can always reach out for the projections, and believe that they were sent to everybody in the school committee, if I'm not mistaken. So we have that. Also talked about, speaking of the Visual Performing Arts Center, we made the decision that we'd want to create a dedicated building committee for that center itself, and kind of had the consensus that it should be made up of the facilities subcommittee members, as well as the members of the existing superintendent's Visual and Performing Arts Committee. To the people that have been familiar with it, the big players in it, so I feel like those would be the best people involved. So that was the recommendation that we had for that. And then also the big item we talked about, pretty heavy on the heart. We did discuss school safety at the new Robert Connors Elementary School. We went into a lot of details. I really wouldn't have time to go over everything today. But I know myself, I'm going to meet with the Connors Building Committee Chair, Tom Shannon. I'm going to reach out to him and see if he or the committee want to meet to go into more specifics about the process, really, just to touch base and figure out what we can do, what we can't do from here, and just make the building as safe as possible. So as long as the public knows that the school committee has the safety of this building at the very, very forefront, it is our biggest concern right now. So if there's any thoughts, questions, comments that anybody would have, please email myself or Superintendent Webster. I'd be more than happy to go over everything. So those were the items that we covered today. That is all I have to report, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen, followed by Negotiations Subcommittee, presented by Mark Kerr.
So just for public notice, most of the work the negotiations committee does is in the executive session, so we really can't discuss most of what we do publicly. But tonight the committee met with Superintendent Webster and Bobby from the CEO. So we've kind of laid out some of the issues that we'll be bringing up, and our first negotiation is scheduled for Friday. So things are moving along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Now we continue with the Student Engagement Subcommittee, presented by Megan Parks.
We had our second meeting tonight. We discussed identifying and inviting students, current students who are maybe not quite engaged in the programming, to get some input from them. We worked on defining student engagement from a student's perspective, not necessarily like a teacher's perspective on it. We discussed that any plans we come up with, we're going to need to promote those really well, so that they can potentially be funded, because otherwise we're doing a bunch of work for nothing. And I think that's about it. We did a lot of brainstorming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parks. One item that's not on the this segment here is our student comment section. So I didn't realize RJ was going to be here this evening. I want to allow her some time on what she has on her agenda.
Thank you. So the LHS is having a winter carnival this week. So today was career day, and most people were dressed up as their dream job. Tomorrow is character day, which means dress up as your favorite fictional character. So anybody can dress as SpongeBob tomorrow. Wednesday will be college day, which means dress to support any college of your choice. Thursday will be class color day, and Friday will be Blue Devil Day, and everybody will be dressed in blue and white. Also, the LHS Celebrate Diversity International Club will be hosting a fashion show on Friday, March 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the LHS cafeteria. Doors will be open at 5:30 and refreshments will be sold. The evening will be filled with multicultural music, fashion, and food. Admission is free and donations are accepted. That's all.
Thank you. We appreciate all your reports. All right, moving on to agenda item number 6. I believe most folks in the room are here for this item. Before I move ahead with this topic, I want to see a show of hands if there are anybody who would like to speak at this time. Yep, that's item number 6, to receive information on PBL topics. So we have a good, what, 20-ish more? Okay, thank you. All right. So before Tina, Ms. Hutchinson approaches the podium, item number 6 is to receive information on PBL topics in preparation for the school committee meeting on March 19th to be devoted to possible decisions on various PBL issues. So what I'm going to do is allow public input at this time, but let me just read this first. Lewiston residents, taxpayers, students, school and city department employees may address the school committee for up to 2 minutes on this agenda item. Information pertaining to staff, personnel matters, or student issues should be directed to the superintendent or appropriate staff members of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee, not repetitious and related to the agenda subject matter. We thank you for your comments. However, please be advised that this is not a time for questions and answers. Whether you're in the audience and unable to speak or watching the video, we encourage you to contact us electronically. Depending on the subject matter, questions should be brought to the attention of the superintendent, the school committee chair, your ward representative, or subcommittee chair. When you do come up to the podium, present your name, address, or ward number, and you'll be signaled when you have 1 minute remaining. Before folks come up to the podium, I'd like to see if we could get the students up first, because I know some of them have homework and other assignments to do at home. So are there any students that would like to speak tonight? Feel free to come right up to the podium, and there's a button.
Hello, I'm a freshman at Lewiston High School, and I am currently a part of the PBL grading system. This is my first year using this grading system, and I believe it has benefited my class. With PBL, it is mandatory that you're allowed to redo all failed assignments, and there is always room for improvement. Also, with this system, you always know exactly what you need to work on by seeing which standards you failed. I will acknowledge that Empower is extremely difficult to use, and as a student, I do not know how to access my grades. But PBL is not based around Empower. Empower is just like Power School. It is just a website to see our grades. I believe if Empower was updated, gotten rid of, or simply explained to students, then there would be much less complaints against PBL. Finally, I do not want to have what happened to the current seniors happen to my class. They tried out PBL in their freshman year as well, but then switched back and all their grades for the year were erased. I've worked hard for my grades and I want to keep them, as I believe all my peers wish to also. Thank you for listening.
All right, seeing none, are there any? I saw a lot of hands, so line up to the podium if there's anybody else that would like to speak on this subject matter.
Hi, I'm Pete Geiger. I live at 16 Brentwood Avenue. I give out giant candy bars at that address. As I was reminded at a restaurant, I saw a little kid over the weekend who reminded me about how many candy bars I'm going to give out next year. I have a long history in education. I was on the panel that wrote the standards back in the 90s. I was chair of the state board when they were passed. I served on a number of committees. I was just recently, my last term ended on the state board. I actually got on in 2012 when the proficiency-based diploma law was being debated. Whether you like it or you don't like it, understand that there's some fixes to this PBL I regret the fact that there hasn't been the leadership at the Department of Education, a consistent leadership at the Department of Education to pull off something that's really very difficult, but I very much support it. One thing I want to address today, because it was in the paper last week, is that colleges don't accept PBL transcripts. Nothing is further from the truth. It was mentioned that somebody called a bunch of colleges, but nothing is ever said about who those colleges are. What I want to do is present you with a list of 73 colleges, including Harvard, Amherst, all of the University of Maine system, Bates College. This is 73 in this list, but actually Bates, Williams, and I forget who the third is. So there's 76 colleges that have stated that they accept the PBL transcript. So I could talk for maybe 2 hours on the topic, but I would suggest that don't throw PBL out, or don't even try to. Try to figure out how you make it work. And I think it revolves around communication, or the lack of communication. And I think there's been so much miscommunication that I'm hoping that you as a committee will try to learn more about it. Maybe bring in a guidance director from Bates College to talk about it. But trust me, PBL, which means that you understand the topic, is going to get you into college. A's and B's don't mean anything. We think they do, but they don't mean anything. I think the PBL means something. So I'm going to hand the list to whoever for the committee, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Winslow. I am the principal at Farwell. I just want to read a series of emails to you. I sent an email to a few college admissions officers, because I'm also a parent of high school students, so to me this is really near and dear to my heart. I said, hi, I'm a parent of high school students, as well as a principal at an elementary school in Lewiston. Lewiston, as well as many other towns in Maine, is going through some grading changes in regards to proficiency-based learning. Can you please tell me the impact of PBL on a student's admissions package? If a student applies to your school with a proficiency-based diploma and a transcript clearly stating a 1 to 4 grading system, how does this translate to your current acceptance and merit policies? So I have one from USM, which if I have time, I'll go back and read that one. But the first one I wanted to read to you, despite what we've seen in the media, is from Boston University. It says, hello, Amanda. The application review process at Boston University is holistic and emphasizes school context. We evaluate applications from students attending schools which utilize a wide variety of curriculums and grading systems, including proficiency-based scales from Maine, New Hampshire, and other parts of the U.S. As a result, proficiency-based transcripts translate seamlessly into our existing selection process. I hope that helps. Chris Down, Associate Director of Boston University Undergraduate Admissions. Another one I'd like to read is from University of New England. Good afternoon, Amanda. My name is Trevor Faulkner, and I am an admissions counselor at the University of New England. Thank you. Excuse me? Okay. Thank you for the email, as this is a concern of many parents. Proficiency-based learning is different from the traditional transcript, but they are helpful during the admissions process. When looking at a PBL transcript, it allows us to see the student in detail. This allows us to really get to know the student and where their strengths are. When talking about merit policies, we rely on school policies, as well as talking to the guidance counselor at the respective school. We try our best to recalculate entire transcripts onto an unweighted 4.0 GPA scale in order to calculate a merit-based award. At no point does proficiency-based learning put the student at a disadvantage during the application process. I hope this helps. If you have other comments. I know my time is running out, but I just want to read you the first sentence from the one at USM. Hi, Amanda. The short answer is that it doesn't affect the students. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen McClure-Richard. I live in Ward 5, been in the other room. I just wanted to speak to the whole college thing. I'm a mom who has a junior at Lewiston High School, and I've been calling colleges. This was never intended to become a personal battle. I thought we were all on the same team. I'm calling colleges. They are telling me that without a GPA, my daughter is at risk of being put in a pile. I've talked to Carnegie Mellon, I've talked to Juilliard, I've talked to Emerson, I've talked to NYU Tisch. They're all telling me the same thing. Without a GPA, her folder, her application is likely to end up in a pile to be addressed later. We're not talking about not getting into the school. We're talking about potentially not getting into the program of choice. We're talking about kids who may end up going with no GPA. Carnegie Mellon said if they don't come with a GPA, we're going to give them one. And they're going to be in better shape if they come with one from their school than if we give them one. Because we're going to use some sort of conversion that we have in front of us to kind of make a GPA up. So it's really important that we focus on, it's not about getting into school, which seems to be where everybody's focused right now. It's about what happens with merit scholarships, with getting into the program of choice. Thank you. And the other piece that people mentioned when I spoke with them was that it had a potential impact on looking at how they would qualify. If they don't have a GPA, they may refer to SAT scores. That may be the only way to determine whether or not a student is able to be in their school, which is really disgusting to think that 4 years of hard work is going to come down to one test score. So I want to be abundantly clear about that. It was supposed to be something we were working on together, and now it's become this huge, oh yes they will, oh no they won't. We're talking about schools outside of Maine. We're not talking about the University of Maine system. We're not talking about the 73 schools that are on the list from Great Schools Partnership, which everybody has seen. That consists of community colleges and University of Maine system. I have 2 degrees from University of Maine system. There's nothing wrong with that, but some kids want more. Thank you.
Just going to pause for a moment. My parliamentarian's requesting additional information here, and that's why I keep looking down at my phone. I changed the rules. Normally we have public comment after there was a presentation. I wanted the board to listen in to public comment on the agenda item beforehand. Just want to make sure that was clear, that was at the chair's discretion, but I'm being told otherwise.
Ordinarily, if there was a motion, we would need to suspend the rules, which requires a 2/3 vote to take up business out of its proper order. But since there's no motion required, you can do it at the chair's discretion, is what I'm currently reading.
Okay. So it's this chair's discretion to have public comment, correct?
For this, but they technically are commenting on an agenda item that has not occurred yet, which makes me nervous.
I did open the agenda item. I think most folks understand what that item is, but
Okay.
do you want, I guess the question to the board is, do they want the presentation ahead of time?
I think there
That's-
should be a
that's the question,
2/3
right?
majority vote on that.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So I need a motion to, right? Okay.
Or we could move to
Should
suspend
we
the
move
rules.
ahead, or should we should we move ahead with Tina doing her presentation now? Or should we continue as is?
If I could just make an observation, we had a number of speakers that addressed this board a week ago. They in effect made an agenda item that wasn't on the agenda. I think giving people here today the same opportunity that was given a week ago would be consistent. And then the board would have the benefit of that input in questions that it may want to ask Tina Hutchison and her committee after she makes a presentation.
Ms. Parks has a question.
Would, after Tina's presentation, would it then be open again for any public questions? No, it would not. Okay.
Questions could be made by the board, but not by the public.
I move to suspend the rules and take up this business out of order then.
Okay. Those in favor?
You need a second.
Oh, wait, we need a second. That's right.
Out of order meaning continuing with
Continuing with public input and then taking the presentation.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Roy. Those in favor? Those against? That's everybody? Okay. All set?
Yep, we'll proceed.
All right, we may proceed. Thank you for that moment for reflection. Any others that would like to speak, please come up to the podium, present your name, address, and/or ward number, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Jillian Shepherd, 12 Manning Place. I am ward number 2. Thank you. And I have We have a student class of 2019. He's a junior, and then I have a 7th grader. It's too late in the night to do that math. I just want to follow up with what Karen just said. Fresh in my mind, just got off a call from Boston College today, spoke with a gentleman. I find it's much easier in my correspondence with colleges to talk with the administration or the admissions people in person as opposed to sending them an email. I think that they're more apt to be sensitive to parents' concerns, and they're apt to, really identify with us and give us a little bit more information when it's not in the written form. This gentleman was incredibly helpful today. He talked to me about BC, about PBL transcripts. He said that for BC, they do not do any pre-sorting, so that would mean that you don't have 3 piles, and a college is looking at specific GPAs. If they're at that GPA, they're in the yes pile, we'll consider. They're not at the GPA, they're in the no pile, or they're roundabout, they're in the maybe pile. Big schools do have this pre-sorting. This is what they do. So when we're encouraging our children to think big, this is who they're going up against. They're looking at GPAs. If there isn't a GPA, the next thing down is the SAT scores, because that is consistent between all of these children. So Boston College went on to say that he sees these PBLs, he takes that holistic approach, but that, to be honest, it's going to be a couple years before they really understand the whole PBL. They're going to admit a few of these students, and they're going to watch these students as they go through the BC program. Can they handle the rigor? And how these children that are products of PBL respond to BC's rigor is going to increase or decrease the amount of applicants in the future that BC is going to admit into their program. So again, we're talking about keeping our kids competitive. We have a lot of kids who are looking to go beyond the state of Maine. USM is fabulous. UNE are great schools. I've had many conversations with Bowdoin and Colby and Bates, but we have to remember that this is all about keeping our children competitive. They have worked for 11 years of their academic careers to go into prestigious schools, and we owe that to them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Roger Fuller. I live at 36 Elliott Avenue. And as I look around the room today, I notice that I'm probably the oldest person in the room and maybe for certain the oldest teacher. So I have a bit of experience. And in a galaxy a long time ago and far away, I had the great opportunity to serve on the very first committee that established promising futures and the standards under which we're discussing. So that was an honor, it was a joy, and it was also a vision of the future. But last week, I want to share with you, I received a very interesting letter from a constituent, and I'll quote that constituent. To be clear, I do not disagree with the idea of standards-based diplomas. I think the intent of the law is being misinterpreted in many cities and towns across Maine, and therein lies the rub. It's the misinterpretation of the law. So today, I was lucky enough to spend time with the METRI report, and that's the Maine Education Policy Research Institute, and I studied very closely what they said, and I'll quote that for you. It is important to note that various instructional assessment practices have also been promoted or adopted at the local level, such as the 4-point grading scale versus the 100-point scale, or A to F grading, student pace and progress, blended or online learning, increased technology for instructional and or data management uses. And I'm still quoting. Some schools and districts have adopted these approaches in local policy and or were required to engage in corresponding practices as a part of grant-funded arrangements. However, these approaches and practices are not required within the state statute and are not implemented in all Maine schools. History tells us that 7 commissioners in 8 years have rendered the department, the DOE, almost unable to lead. But we know that proficiency-based education is the best system for our children. I like to say that you don't need good eyesight to have a good vision. And proficiency-based education is at the heart and soul of what it means to grow up in Maine and Maine children can profit from that and create their own promising future. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Doug Dumont, and I'm Aspirations Coordinator at Lewiston High School. I've heard a considerable amount of inaccurate and incomplete information over the last several months regarding proficiency-based learning and grading. I feel it's important to share the most accurate information currently available. Over the past 4 years since I've been at Lewiston High School, I've had countless conversations with college admissions counselors from all over the country. My conversations have been with a wide variety of public and private institutions, from the most selective schools to schools who have open admission and accept all students with a high school diploma. During my most recent conversations, the topic of proficiency-based learning and proficiency-based grading has been the focus of my conversations. Every single one of my conversations have indicated that a proficiency-based grading system will have no adverse impact on an individual's opportunity for admission into college, from the most selective to the least selective schools. Colleges and universities accept applications and transcripts from students all over the world, all of which have traditional and non-traditional grading practices. All of the colleges have indicated that they review all applications holistically, considering the applicant as an individual, not only selective parts of the application such as GPA and SAT scores. Through my conversations, the following schools have indicated that there are no negative implications for students in regards to college admissions and proficiency-based grading and learning. I'll share the name of the school, the institution's acceptance rate, and the respondent. University of Chicago, 7.9%. James Nondorf, Dean of Admission and Financial Aid. Claremont McKenna, 9.4%. Jefferson Huang, Vice President for Admission and Financial Aid. Brown University, 9.3%. Logan Powell, Dean of Admission. Princeton University, 6.5%. McKenna Lauren May, Admission Counselor. Bates College, 22.6%. Lee Weisenberger, Dean of Admission and Financial Aid. In addition to these individualized statements, as Peter Geiger stated, the New England Secondary School Consortium and the New England Board of Higher Education, not the Greater Schools Partnership, identified the 73 post-secondary institutions that have all said that there are no adverse effects of proficiency-based grading and learning on the college admissions process. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donna Olson. I'm a teacher at Lewiston High School. I teach 9th grade world history, and so I'm currently using PBL and the 1 to 4 scale. I'm here to voice my support for both today. What I like the most about PBL is that it shifts the focus of the classroom from teacher instruction to student learning. The typical cycle of instruction begins with the skills or knowledge that are being assessed, that I teach and model, and then students practice and eventually assess on. If students aren't able to show that they've met the standard, they have the opportunity to try again. Once we shift the focus from teacher instruction to student learning, the consequence for not learning is simply that you have to try again and you have to learn. Grit and effort are rewarded whether it takes one try or whether it takes more than one try. Conversations about reassessments can also lead to opportunities for me to build positive relationships with students most at risk. I also like grading on a 1 to 4 scale. I think that I can grade more holistically using 1 to 4. I can read an essay or look at a project to see if the elements required to show proficiency are there. I believe that 0 to 100 leads to more arbitrary grades and does nothing to inform on what a student knows and what they can do. For example, I could give an essay an 86, while another teacher could give an 81. One teacher may weigh or scale grades when another doesn't. The grade itself, then, it becomes meaningless. The list can go on and on. 0 to 100 also creates an environment where students measure their success against that of other students. We worked hard at the high school to involve all stakeholders in planning. For example, we proposed a Latin honors system that recognizes students by measuring their work against the standards, not against one another. It's more inclusive. It doesn't pit student against student in a race to distinguish themselves by decimal points. In closing, I'm proud of the work that we've done in preparing to bring PBL to Lewiston. And I know that change isn't easy, and I completely understand that parents and students are fearful, but I'm asking you to trust that the work that we've done has been in good faith and serves the best interests of the students of Lewiston.
Good evening. My name is Michaela Stanley. I've worked at Lewiston High School for 11 years and have taught on freshman gold team for 7 years. I am for proficiency-based learning and a grading scale of 1 through 4. I don't want to see it go away. We've been preparing this for 5 years, and I was very disappointed 4 years ago when Lewiston Public Schools pulled back on the grading. Although some may not remember this now, at the time, the students and parents we're also sad that it went away. This year, the major obstacle in our implementation is PBL is Empower. It takes triple the time to create assignments and enter grades, and it takes even longer to finalize grades for progress reports. I'm here tonight because I became increasingly concerned after reading the article from last week that made it seem like proficiency was going away. As I feel that the problem is the reporting tool. I believe the school system needs to spend more time educating on the 4-point scale. For example, after the meeting last week on Tuesday, a student made a comment in class saying that he's not going to try to get a 3 anymore because it's all going to go away. As an educator and a parent and a community member, this is very upsetting. I would hate to see what happened to this year's seniors happen again and impact our current freshmen. Also, if the district pulls back on proficiency-based scoring on a 1 through 4 scale, how will I finish teaching the curriculum for the rest of the year? What incentives does the students have when everything they've been taught is suddenly made invalid? What structures can I try to provide my students when, as a teacher, my structure, the system I believe in, is taken away? Thank you.
So, as many of you in this room know, my name's Kristen Cloutier. I live at 33 Charles Street. And while I wear many hats, tonight I'm here speaking as a parent. My daughter is a 3rd grader at Farwell Elementary School. And while many members of the school committee received these comments in an email last week, I felt it should also be shared at this meeting as a means of public record. So there are several issues that I want to address as part of the PBL conversation. As the parent of a child who attends public school in Lewiston and who has known no other grading than the 1 through 4 system, I'm actually quite upset that you're even considering reversing it to accommodate a few grades at the high school. To do so changes everything my 3rd grader and her peers have learned and understand about grading. I understand the desire by some for a 1 to 100 grading system for those at the high school. What I don't understand is the need or desire to turn back the clock on all of the hard work that has already been done by many of our teachers, students, parents, and administrators in the lower grades. Quite honestly, in my opinion, it's actually a slap in the face to these individuals who have devoted the time and commitment to teaching all the children in our school system, not just those at the high school. And I know this because I've personally spoken to many of them as a parent, as a member of the district PBL committee, and in my former capacity as a school committee member. What I feel you as a board fail to recognize or choose not to recognize is that many of those folks who choose not to come forward because they choose not to come forward because they don't have issues with the system. And more importantly, many of them choose not to come forward because they are intimidated by those who do. Regardless of their reasoning, you as a committee have an obligation to seek their feedback. That's what you were elected to do. It will always seem easiest to respond to the loudest voices, but please do your due diligence and solicit a broader range of input. All of the children in our school system are relying on you for that. As a believer in open, honest, and direct communication, I do not feel that that was what was employed at last week's meeting. While I believe strongly in the need for continued conversation around the implementation of proficiency-based learning, it seems odd and completely inappropriate that such a large conversation around the issue should take place at a meeting when the topic isn't even on the agenda. How does that allow those with opposing viewpoints to express their concerns to the committee? Or perhaps that was the point, to avoid hearing from those with opposing viewpoints. Had I known that this would be a topic of discussion, I would have been here last week. Unfortunately, I wasn't given that opportunity. While I understand that you can't control public comment, it is my understanding, and it was quite clear from those who were in attendance, that this was a coordinated effort. I certainly hope that this will be a much larger conversation that allows comment from both sides before anything is acted upon. I would encourage you to engage in conversation with a larger percentage of parents and teachers, many of whom support PBL and the 1 to 4 grading system that is currently being utilized in our elementary schools. Thank you.
Good evening. Not to worry, it's not my list of plans. But this is information that I will pass out to the school committee, and if others want a digital copy, if you don't want to kill some trees, I can email you a copy. My name is Caitlin Paquette, and I am the Director of Student Services at Lewiston High School. I have worked at the high school for the last 10 years. My first thing I would like to address tonight is the 1 through 4 grading scale and grade point average reporting of students. I can appreciate how, at first review, the grade scale may seem to give less information about students' academic progress. However, reporting student proficiency using this scale gives us more information about what a student knows and what a student can do, and where the gaps may exist in a student's learning. When a student meets proficiency with a score of a 3, we are assured that that student knows the material and can demonstrate that knowledge. We are assured that the student has demonstrated higher level thinking and is proficient in college and career readiness standards. We've made great progress with PBL and the assessment of student work over the last 4 years. Our graduation rate has increased a significant amount in the last year, which I believe can be attributed to the hard work of our teaching staff across the district and to the shift to standards-based grading. Teachers are now able to support students in specific areas where they are struggling to meet proficiency. And still there is work to be done. When we score students on a 0 to 100 scale, they pass and earn credit with partial proficiency. Students are graduating without all the skills needed to be successful in their post-secondary goals. The blame for this should not be placed on any individual or group of individuals, for I believe the educators in Lewiston Public Schools care deeply for the students in their classes and give their greatest effort. But graduating students with partial proficiency can be attributed to a 0 to 100 grade scale, which leads to inflated grades and an inaccurate picture of what a student knows. Each year we have students who graduate from the high school but whose AccuPlacer scores require them to enroll in remedial classes at the college. Our students are paying for college classes which do not count towards their degrees because our current grade scale allows them to graduate without college and career readiness skills required. In the coming year, the stakes will be even higher as the main community college system schools that many of Lewiston High School graduates attend, began using SAT scores as the primary tool to place students in college-level classes. Even many of the colleges who do not require test scores in an application will require that students submit those scores before enrolling to properly place them in college classes. By retaining a 0 to 100 scale, we are not identifying and filling the gaps in learning and ensuring proficiency for all of Lewiston students, and we are failing to fully prepare them for their post-secondary education. I have for you a copy of the school profile, which others have talked about, regards to college admissions, as well as copies of my notes from individual conversations I've had with college admissions officers and email communications we've received from the colleges.
Good evening. My name is Jana Mates. I am the principal at Lewiston Middle School. Similar to what Kristen was saying, I was not at the meeting last week, not knowing that this was an orchestrated sort of gathering against some of the work that the district's been doing, but I did want to address the top 4 concerns that I was made aware of. Empower, the 1 through 4 grading scale, student motivation, and the continuum. I'm not going to comment on the college acceptance just because at the middle school level that's not something I'm directly related to. And so, also similar to what Kristen said, we have a lot of staff and parents that wholly trust what we're doing is best for kids, and when we show up every single day, we're giving 100% to these kids to make sure that they're successful. So I put out a survey to our staff, and I just wanted to show the results because I know sometimes data speaks a little bit louder than just a comment. And so 66.7, so almost 70% of our staff currently support the scoring criteria and the 1 through 4. The opposing question, if you look on the survey, was that I prefer the traditional grading 1 through 100 scale and to make my own rubrics, so 33%. So to say that the majority of the teachers don't prefer the 1 through 4 is inaccurate if you're looking at Lewiston Middle School. There was a comment about student motivation, so I also asked teachers a question about if they think PBL increases motivation, decreases motivation, or no change. We have a big mission of instilling a growth mindset at the middle school. And if you can see from here, if you combine the no motivation or increasing motivation, 71% of our staff believe that PBL has increased motivation. I also think a big part of that is relationships. If you have strong relationships with your students, they're not going to play the games to try and get around it. We talked about the continuum, 60%, 66 if you count the other, believe in opening up a continuum for our students. I asked a question about if they feel supported by our district regarding standards, grading, or Empower. Everyone except for one student ranked on a scale at a 3, 4, or a 5 or above. And you can see on the last page there are some concerns with Empower, but at this time it's more the logistics and the glitches of it instead of the reporting system. But I'd be happy to talk more about that if anybody has any questions. Thanks.
Allison Hopkins. I live at 71 Weber Avenue, but I'm also a 5th grade teacher at Longley Elementary School. I was part of the first group last year that used Empower as a 4th grade teacher, and I do agree that there were some glitches and bumps in the road, but as technology gets better and as we use the system, those glitches I have not experienced at all this year. Also, as a teacher in the district and looping up to 5th grade with my students, looking at proficiency-based learning encompasses the instruction and the curriculum, reporting out, and also assessment. And when you focus on like being a teacher and who you are and what you're doing, you're there for the kids to learn. So you're really, when you think about PBL, it's that backwards design and what's best for kids. You think about all those things that you were to put into Power School, the last grading system, and I mean, everyone has their own way of grading, and you have some just erroneous like assignments, like vocab check or quiz here or quiz there. But when you focus on PBL and Empower, you're really focusing on the standard that they're supposed to meet. And it has changed my practice this year, and going back and helping those kids meet and exceed and succeed in their own work. And they've been seeking out for more and more and more of that help because they want to be proficient in this standard. So I strongly encourage you to let the people who have done all this work continue helping us do more of it, and just letting good changes continue. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Darby Ray. I live at 15 Bierce Avenue. I'm the parent of a proud LHS grad and of a 9th grader at Lewiston High School. I just want to say to the school committee, thank you very much for your service. It's important, and I appreciate it, and I know I'm not alone. I'm here because of the recent Sun Journal story, which made me realize there had been this big conversation that I hadn't known about and would have liked to have been a part of. I'm sorry I wasn't here, so what I say may not line up exactly perfectly because I didn't get to hear the conversation last time. But what I learned from the Sun Journal story was that it looked like there are several things being conflated. And so based on my understanding of PBL and what's been happening in the district, and I have been paying close attention, I just want to say that it seems to me it's important to differentiate between PBL as an approach to teaching and learning Empower as a reporting tool, and the 1 to 4 evaluation scale. Except that PBL and the 1 to 4 evaluation scale go together. And so those two things are really important together. I think PBL in its clarity, both for students and for teachers, is a huge improvement over the system that I taught under for a million years. I have been delighted in my own work as a faculty member at Bates College to move toward a 1 through 4 grading scale myself, as have several other faculty. And it's been working really well because of the clarity it provides, because of the fairness across differentiated students and student abilities. It's really, really helpful. I think what we're seeing here are growing pains. I think we've got some problems with Empower. I hear that from teachers. I hear that from my kid. I hear that from my kids' friends all the time. Got to figure that stuff out. But that is separable from PBL as an approach to teaching and learning and the 1 through 4 evaluation scale that goes with it. I also want to say I'm not here to speak on behalf of Bates College, but I am the chair of the Admission and Financial Aid Committee at Bates, and we deal with 1 through 4 all the time. We deal with IB and homeschooling and all those kinds of things. So does everybody. The nation is moving toward PBL across the nation. This is coming. All the great schools are ready for it. It's not a problem. And who said something about there being no GPA? This is crazy. There's a GPA. There is a GPA. You know, of course, if you call a school and say, would you let my kid in with no GPA? They would say, duh, why wouldn't they have a GPA? No, that's a problem. We're not saying, I mean, I've never heard that there wouldn't be a GPA. That's crazy. There is a GPA. We get it. We get it all the time at Bates. We get the GPA from 1 through 4 scoring. Thank you.
Sorry.
My name is Bruce Nicholas. I teach math up at the high school. I've taught for 33 years, but 6 years here in Lewiston, and it's been the best year of my life, to tell you the truth. I was one of those people, I'm a math teacher, that never thought that I would go the other way. In respect to wanting to make this change from 0 to 100, because I was the best at it. I could figure out, a kid could come up and say, what do I need on a quiz? What do I need on a test? What's my homework average? And I could tell them, and they could get that average. Now, I changed from years to year. I sometimes went 15% homework, 10% class participation, 30% quiz, and 40% test. And I could figure it out. And then if a kid wanted to retake a test, he could retake it once, and I would average the two. And I gave him an average. Was that the best way to do it? I'm not really sure. I don't think it really was. The 88 in my room was a 78 in her room and was a 64 at that school. So Algebra 2 is Algebra 2. I teach that. I think I can teach it better in a 1 through 4 scale. I really do. I've done it the other way. I'll do it if that's what I need to do because I'm a team player. I put a lot of time into this. I don't have much time right now. Standards. I use some analogies that really helps people. It didn't matter when I first started to walk. You know, whether I did it 9 months, 12 months, and his parents, they come, oh, my child's not walking yet. They will. You know, it didn't matter when they first started to eat. See, at the end of the year, when they're proficient, I can give them a grade based on they know how to do it now. If I have to get an average, retake the test, get an average in the first quarter, get an average in the second quarter, take the final exam. Oh, we don't have those anymore. Add that into it and give an average. I can do that, okay? But I can do it better 1 through 4. When I go to I'll finish with this. If I go to a restaurant, somebody asked, how was the meal? I don't go as an 88. I said, the service was good, the food was warm, I set a standard, but it's not 1 through 100. It's not. We don't do that.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Darren Hartley. I work for Down East Financial Group. I'm a benefits specialist here in the Lewiston, Auburn area. I also taught the Jobs for Maine Graduates program here at Lewiston Regional Technical Center on and off for about 14 years. I left education on 2 occasions to go out in the private sector. And what I'm doing here tonight is I hear the conversation about standards-based learning and however type of standards you want to engage. What I just want folks to do is not lose sight of area employers, especially area employers who are looking at young adults, late teen, 19, 20-year-old students who are going into the world of work. And even though most of the employers that I work with, they don't have an opinion of how you're teaching the students, what they wanted for me to share with you all tonight is to talk briefly about what they hope to see from a student coming out of Lewiston High School, Lewiston Regional Technical Center, and what are the skill sets that they have to bring with them to go to the world of work. And anecdotally, things that they feel are lacking today. Kids aren't on time, and when they get there, they're trying to get out of work as soon as they get there. The cell phone use is the #1 distraction for every single employer that I work with. I write insurance with 31 companies in 6 years that I've been in private sector. It's the #1 distraction, and they think it all starts in the classroom and at home with the parents, and it transfers into the world of work. 3, learn how to be a teammate. Get along well with others. Be a friendly teammate. Listen more, talk less. If you don't understand what's going on, ask questions. Ask questions so you really understand what they're trying to instruct you. Kids don't understand the essence of appearance and hygiene. Drama. Social media allows them to continue to bring drama. We used to have a term in JMG, it was called leave it in the parking lot. Kids don't leave anything in the parking lot. They bring it into work every day. Criminal history. Half of the people on my list cannot insure people to drive company vehicles. And lastly, very, very simple skills. Kids don't know how to read a tape measure, count change without the benefit of cash register, and understand simple fluid ounce measurements. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Lavoie, and I run the Lewiston location for Moody's Collision Center. We do have 11 locations across the state, and we have about 200 coworkers. And some of the things that we try to work with LRTC, as well as some other local schools with VOTEC, is some of the things that we see, like Darren had mentioned, that's really important. We'd like to see kids have more work readiness, some financial literacy, really, really important. Soft skills, how to be a good team player, how to be responsible, how to be reliable. All these things that we see that are lacking when kids come into the workforce. Learning how to collaborate, be on a team and be productive and listen to opinions. And understand that together you can do greater things than individually. One of the things that we've always felt is there is a disconnect between academics and the industries out there. Some of the things that we may suggest to help kids is to actually educate the educators. Take some time, and whether we come up with a program that we work with the local businesses on how to get educators out into the best of certain industries and have them understand what these employers are really looking for in people that are coming in and what kind of skills they can help to teach them when they get there. They will be much more valuable assets. We'll be able to compensate them more, and every company will be able to grow. We struggle to find people to fill jobs that are needed desperately to make our economy grow. And appreciate your time. Just wanted to help give you some information on how to collaborate with businesses. And hopefully this information will help you guys get a better way to, some information, I should say, into learning what the PBL should have in it. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Angela Gilbert. I am at 8 St. Pierre Street, and I'm also a teacher at Lewiston Middle School. When I first started teaching here 7 years ago, every teacher and every content taught completely different things. There were different projects assigned and different skills that were being assessed in completely different ways. And now, for the first time since I've been here, teachers and students are all on the same page. We're able to talk to each other and help each other in a way that we just couldn't before because we were all on different pages. So I really believe that we need to stay the course and keep the 1 to 4 grading scale. Standards are skills. We're teaching skills in this district in a way that I haven't seen before. And it makes more sense to score skills based on a 1 to 4 scale than it does on a 0 to 100 scale. Last year, I taught standards on a 0 to 100 scale because there was no other way to report out on it, and it didn't work. I was in Jake's office constantly complaining about it because it just doesn't fit. It's working now because we are reporting out on 1 to 4. Last year, even though I was teaching standards, it was more about getting a number than it was about gaining the skill. And now it's about the skill. Students know that a 2 means that they're almost there. I have a bulletin board in my room that says 2, almost there, 3, nailed it, so that they know what it means. It's no longer about passing with a basic understanding of a skill, and that's no longer good enough. You have to earn the 3. You have to show that you have the skill, and when a student earns a 3, we know exactly what they can do. If they get a 2, we know exactly what they can and can't do, and we know how to help them to get to the next level. Students are owning their learning in a way that I have never seen before in this district. We need to stay the course, and we need to keep moving forward. If we teach the students how to use Empower, and if we teach them what standards are, and if we teach them what a 1 to 4 means, then they are going to learn what that means. I'd also, don't take my word for it, I invite any member of the school committee to come into my classroom and see the positive impact that the standards and that the 1 to 4 scale has had. Talk to my students. A bunch of them wanted to come today, but rides was a problem, so I'll email everybody. I'd invite you to my room at any point to come see what it looks like and talk to the kids about it. Thank you so much.
Charlotte Niall, I'm the literacy coach at the Lewiston Middle School. PBL has helped us grow as professionals. Building scoring criteria for the standards we report out on has helped guide teachers with their teaching and grading. When I first started teaching at the middle school 6 years ago, we did not have a curriculum. We used standards loosely to guide our instruction. An 80 in my class was much different than an 80 in the classroom down the hall. Now we have a curriculum for some content areas, and we have dissected the standards and understand what we need to teach. As a coach, I can walk into any literacy classroom and expect students to be learning similar content. Not only has the scoring criteria helped guide our teaching and grading, it has also helped us to be more intentional in our reteaching. Teachers are able to notice what skills students have control over and what skills they need to reinforce to help meet proficiencies. Another great thing about PBL and being on the same page as the content is that any literacy teacher could help a student meet literacy standards. We are using the same tools to grade our students. Again, prior to PBL, teachers use their own systems and tools for grading. Since implementing PBL, I have noticed students have increased their level of thinking because the standards we are teaching require that of students. We no longer require all students to read a certain text in order to pass for the trimester. Instead, we are asking students to determine a theme in a text and provide evidence to support their thinking, which is something they can do with any text. I used to hear students say, "Is this the right theme?" And now I hear students say, "I have found 2 themes and evidence to support both." It is clear from this example that students are working towards the standards instead of relying on the teacher's answer key. Our district has put a lot of time and effort into making PBL work. While our systems may not be perfected yet, I think it would be a disservice to our students and teachers to give up on this journey that we have started.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Burgoyne, 850 Main Street, Lewiston. I'm a literacy support teacher at LMS. I'd like to discuss 2 positive outcomes of proficiency-based learning. Namely, it improves my instruction and establishes a growth mindset in my classroom. One way this is true is that there are clear learning targets. These targets drive my lesson planning and assessments, and with an average-based system, sticking to the standard could have easily been slipped and gone unnoticed. Diligence to reteach a skill to a student could have been abandoned because, to be honest, in a sea of other unrelated assignments, it all averaged out in the end. That is less likely to happen in this current grading system. I'm often face-to-face with students who lack confidence in their potential as a learner. Their mindset is fixed. Having evidences based on targets allows me to notice, name, and celebrate student successes and target areas for growth. In the celebrating, kids can also name what they do well, and this empowers them. It makes them want to utilize their skills repeatedly and learn more. Even in my own practice, coaches, admin, and colleagues who notice and name specific skills I'm successful at empower me. This is filtering into my classroom, and it's exciting to see its effects. Winston Churchill said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, and it is courage to continue that counts." To the kids who naturally or want to excel, I want them to be motivated to learn after their successes. I don't want them to stop at the 100. I want them to know that they can exceed it. To the kids who are striving for proficiency, I want them to recognize failure is not fixed, it's fluid and an agent to success. I acknowledge that there is an obvious learning curve happening. There are genuine concerns to student motivation, and there is ample frustration around documenting and reporting out grades. I do not deny this. My greatest concern right now is reporting out growth for students who are well below grade level and documenting their progress where they are at. There has been a significant amount of support and time dedicated to collaboration among teachers at the middle school over these concerns, and what I ask is that we have the courage to continue.
Excuse me, my name is Patrick Stanton. I live at 13 Brentwood Avenue, just across the street from the candy bar restaurant that Mr. Geiger runs once a year. I'm also a teacher at Lewiston Middle School. I teach literacy support. I want to say that PBL has made student work and scoring much more meaningful than the traditional 0 to 100 average grading system. By designating learning tasks as examples of specific standards, PBL allows students to see what they are strong at and what they need development in. In the past, a student in my class might have earned an 80 on an assignment connected to theme. While this probably would have been enough to make the student and his parents happy, it really wouldn't have said much about whether he had mastered the content and could apply it. Because of PBL, grades now clearly communicate to my student that he either is or is not yet proficient with theme, and he can now clearly see that he should focus his academic efforts on another standard, or that he needs to spend more time and attention on a standard connected to theme. PBL also creates an environment where standards must be met and where students are not permitted to submit substandard work without being asked to revise. The 0 to 100 average grading system that we've moved away from created a safety net so large that students who typically performed well could still pass my class even if they completely lacked a key understanding. That system allowed students to mask their level of understanding about discrete academic skills with a general overview of how the grading period had gone for them. PBL removes that mask by indicating exactly how a student is performing on discrete skills and demanding that a student take steps to show that he has mastered those skills before moving on. I understand that last week you received some different feedback about the status of PBL in Lewiston schools. I want to leave you tonight with the idea that the loudest voices aren't necessarily always those of the majority. I know that PBL is what's best for the students of Lewiston schools. I also know that it takes time, discussion, reflection, and patience as students, parents, and teachers work through the initial growing pains of this switch. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Laprise. I live at 21 Coburn Street, Lewiston, and I am also a Lewiston Middle School teacher. As a special education teacher at LMS, I have been provided the opportunity to co-teach with a general education teacher, Mrs. Gilbert, who you heard from previously, within the content area of literacy. Proficiency-based learning has provided our students in the resource room, as well as students who receive support in the general education setting, the fluidity to move from one setting to another. PBL has created a common language in classrooms that provides my students with disabilities the opportunity to transition to the general education setting with the appropriate tools in their toolbox to be successful. This provides our students with the same opportunities as their peers to become exposed to new teachers, different classmates of different levels, and enrich their educational experience. However, I would like to encourage our community to come together and further support our students with and without disabilities to work towards creating a stronger vision of what will await them once they have completed high school. With the appropriate and innovative accommodations, services, and support, I truly believe that our students can be successful in the proficiency-based learning model. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Jen Hudner. I am a teacher at Lewiston Middle School. I also teach special education. PBL allows us to see if a student has gaps in learning that prevents them from reaching a grade level standard. Say for instance, if a student missed a standard in 5th or 6th grade and is having difficulty with a standard in 8th grade. By looking back, we can see that gap and address it so the student can be more successful in his or her grade level instruction. This is especially true of special populations and English language learners. I realize that many are frustrated with some of the glitches. We are learning a new system and there will be a learning curve. That is to be expected. I too get frustrated with time consumed working out problems, figuring out new software, and so on. But I don't believe we have given it enough of a chance to truly judge whether or not it is worthwhile. Proficiency-based gives us the chance to focus on each student. On our team, we are using research projects done in social studies and literacy that will be graded in both social studies and literacy. They will be presenting projects in science that we will use to grade literacy and science standards. This gives the students more time to do quality work, more chances to practice, and more chances to achieve standards without having to do busy work. We are not creating work to give students a greater chance at a good average. Even if a student didn't do well initially, then the light bulb goes off, something that we all love to see. It's not about the average, it's about that light bulb.
Hello, my name is Allison Avery. I teach 8th grade math at the middle school. I come from a unique background. This is my first year in Lewiston, and I've had the privilege of teaching in Florida and Alabama, both under proficiency-based diplomas, and those kids are going to college just like everybody else. There's no problems there. Seeing PBL work really, really well there, it shows that this does work. It promotes intrinsic motivation in our students. It gets them really thinking about their own learning. And on a 0 to 100 scale, kids, they'll just do the bare minimum. On standards base, they actually want to get that standard. They want to learn. They do this because they know that they can succeed. We don't expect a 2-year-old to tie their shoes the same way. So why are we expecting this from our students? Like, there are at least 5 different ways I know people tie their shoes. So let's just let our kids have that opportunity to get there on their own. But again, this works in so many different places, and I think that we just need to let our students have the time to get used to this. I know at the middle school, we've had to adjust them to the growth mindset. They're coming from this fixed mindset, like, I get to do this once, and then I'm done. With PBL, it's all about continuing that learning and keeping going. And I think we need to keep on going and show that to our students if we want them to succeed in life.
Evening, I'm Shanna Cox from 119 Ash Street. Thanks to the school committee members, but also thanks to all the teachers who are spending their time with my kids. Really appreciate that. I have 3 children. My youngest is at Montello and was in the pilot year for PBL. And so for many ways, it's what he's always known. And I have 2 twins who are at the middle school, thanks again. And they're on different teams and they've been in different classrooms all the way up through. And I can tell you that up until this year, every night at homework, it was a guessing game over who was learning what. There was no consistency on what they were learning. There was no consistency on how it was graded, and it was really hard to support them as a parent. This year, my kids can support each other, which is amazing. In addition to that, my son, who skates through and tests well and has an easy time in a traditional kind of assessment academic environment, is being challenged in ways that excites him and excites me to watch. My other son, who struggles at traditional assessments, who does not test well, who has been graded on a 0 to 100 year after year and pulls up short, this year we get to talk about him in terms of not yet. You don't have that yet son. You can have that tomorrow and you can have that next week, but you don't have it yet. Whereas the last 6 years have been teaching him, you don't have it, you can't get it, you're not there. It is a different mindset, and it's the mindset I've always embraced. It's really nice that the school system is now supporting that. It's the only thing my youngest has ever known. And so when we get to have conversations about the 1 to 4 grading scale in our house, we're talking about learning. We're talking about, instead of saying, how did you do in science? I get to say, it looks like you were supposed to understand how chlorophyll gets through the plant. Can you explain that to me? I'm able to ask for a specific skill and a specific understanding, which I think the real opportunity to improve is communication so that we know what it is at home. I'm excited that parents are organizing. I hope that that same level of support shows up for the budget, because that's the conversation this community needs to have. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Spencer Emerson. I live at 400 College Street, and I am a math teacher at Lewiston Middle School. One thing that comes up a lot to me personally is the idea of student motivation and retakes. I want to echo some of the things I've heard from my colleagues in the sense of student motivation isn't an issue when you focus on the relationships you have with your students. I believe I have a lot of behavioral issue and a lot of distracted students that do lack motivation. However, they don't sit there and talk about they can just retake it because they feel a connection to me and they know that I expect a higher standard, literally and figuratively. I also thought about retakes in the sense of we're all professionals in this room, and the idea that if you fail your praxis, or if you don't pass your driver's test, or if you miss the bar exam, you're not told, well, you're going to take it again, we're going to average it out, and maybe you'll teach, maybe you'll be a lawyer, maybe you won't be. I think that is more of a, I think it's kind of unreasonable to ask that of students in our public school system. And I'll keep it short and sweet. I worked at Bates College as a football coach last year. I recruited student athletes across the country. A student athlete had a PBL diploma. We did pre-reads on them. A student athlete had a 3.6 with honors classes. The student with the PBL diploma got into Bates College over the student that had a 3.6 in honors classes. So the idea that PBL hinders ability to get into college, I believe is not true. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Don Ferrara, one of the assistant principals at the high school. I guess what I want to start with is I have a unique perspective in where this comes from. I was at Halldale High School 10 years ago when they went to a proficiency-based system, not because LD 1422 was in play, but because we knew it was the best thing for students. And we had the same growing pains that Lewiston's having now. We had the same type of parent groups. We had some secret handshake groups as well that were happening, and they don't solve anything. And we have to be careful to get pulled into those groups because misinformation runs rampant in them. Students will get into college. I called my friends over at Halldale now who've been doing this 10 years and asked, just tell me where your kids went last year. And immediately, without even digging, these are the top places that they went, and she didn't dig. West Point, Boston University, Boston College, Carnegie Mellon, the aforementioned college, Wesley, St. Joseph's, UConn, USM, UMass Amherst, engineering, the most difficult program they have to get into. Wheaton, Maine Maritime, University of Rochester, Thomas, Bowdoin, Colgate, Rensselaer, St. Michael's, UNH, St. Louis, Clark, Holy Cross, Colby, Bates, Husson, Rhode Island Institute of Technology, very difficult. Gordon, Iowa State, Syracuse University, Michigan State, Liberty, Wheaton, Cedarville, Plymouth State, Unity College, Brandeis, and Wesley. Very difficult schools to get into. They had no problem, and they've done that for the last 10 years. While I was there during the transition, we had students that get into MIT, Colgate, big-time universities. I think what we have to remember is that we want learning to be the constant and time the variable. For too long, seat time has equaled credit. Now you have to actually show what you can do. And it's not an average of strengths covering weaknesses. You have to be able to do all the components that we're looking for. And that's important as you're moving out through us. There are glitches. But the old system is broken, and we know that. And if we go back to that, in my opinion, it is educational malpractice. 8 weeks is not enough time to make a decision to change 6 years' worth of work. And we have 6 years invested and longer. And I'm telling you from a school that went down that road, Lewiston is ahead of where that school was. Our people have given you everything they can, and they have answered the call. And I have never worked with a better set of professionals in my career. And they are ready. Do not take that from them.
Microphone. Hey, boss, you should have told me. Sorry. Did everybody hear me, or should I repeat myself? Okay. We'll move ahead with Ms. Tina Hutchinson's presentation from the Teaching and Learning Committee.
There we go. It was decided to present today in an ongoing response to questions and concerns we've recently received. There is a lot of information at both the local and state level regarding proficiency-based learning. Tonight, the hope is to further the effort to provide factual information so that informed decisions can be made in the future. So, what exactly does the law say we must do? LD 1422 is the actual law that must be followed. The full law is in the first 3 items in the Teaching and Learning folder in your packet. The law is actually about awarding proficiency-based diplomas. The law says that we must certify that students have met all graduation requirements set forth by the school committee, which is policy IKF, on pages 340 to 342 of the policy manual. The law also says that we have to certify that the student has demonstrated proficiency in meeting state standards in all content areas of the system of learning results under section 6209, which is also in your folder. We must also certify student proficiency in the guiding principles found in the department rules. The content areas are the 9th item in your folder, and the guiding principles are the 10th. Both descriptions come directly from the Maine Department of Education website. So what is proficiency-based learning? Proficiency-based learning, also known as PBL, is the education system that Lewiston Public Schools chose to use to meet the proficiency-based diploma law. PBL, however, is not required by the law. It was a choice this district made. We are implementing PBL by separating what a student knows from how they know it, using habits of work, which is also called HOW, to incorporate work ethic, which is doing homework and class participation, respect, responsibility, and other skill sets. We can see just what a student actually knows based on the assessments they take or do on the materials they are taught. Assessments are not just tests. They can be projects, oral reports, presentations, written reports, or other forms the teacher feels would be a good way to access knowledge, such as a lab experiment. You can find the information here in the administrative folder that's in your packet. When PBL was first implemented, we were using PowerSchool as our reporting system. Due to issues that arose with PowerSchool at that time, it was decided that the district would move to Empower as our reporting system. This does not mean that Empower doesn't have its own issues. Some concerns that have been raised include students do not know where they stand, progress reports and report cards are confusing, it takes a lot of time for teachers to enter data, data is lost and grades are changed, not all schools are using pacing, kids cannot explain standards to their parents and parents do not understand the standards, and the system does not differentiate between year-long standards and standards only taught and assessed once. Issues with PowerSchool included report cards and progress reports that were multiple pages long with few, if any, grades on them. Standards were listed in educator speak, making it difficult for parents and students to understand. A quick view on PowerSchool did not give any information to parents or students. So to summarize, both Empower and PowerSchool have their own issues. Whichever we choose to use, those issues are going to have to be addressed. Honor roll is another area we have heard about. We've been told there is no incentive throughout the school year for kids and that there are inconsistencies in assessments of how grades from teacher to teacher. A decision was made to do honor roll this way in the elementary and middle schools because some standards are taught year long and won't have a final grade until the end of the year. Honor roll at the high school is done differently, which is shown here. And this information is directly from the LHS Standards Handbook, which is also in your administrative folder. Admissions to colleges is very competitive, and concerns have been raised about how students can distinguish themselves from other students. A student earning a 3 on an assessment on the first try is not distinguished from a student earning a 3 after multiple attempts. There is evidence that colleges look not just at transcripts, but at the school profile, letters of recommendations, extracurricular activities, community service, and other aspects of a well-rounded student. A look at our school profile on the high school guidance page may give us a clearer understanding of what is presented to college admissions officers in conjunction with a transcript. The sample of a blended transcript is included in your teaching and learning folder. Right now, the classes of 18 and 21 currently have a blended transcript. What is evidence? We've heard a lot about it. Evidence constitutes many forms. It's assessments, it's observations, it's a project, it's a report, it's a discussion with a group, or it's just the teacher watching a student. So, what about entering evidence? We expect our teachers to enter 3 pieces of evidence per standard. So let's look at that. This is all hypothetical. If you have 15 standards and 3 house standards and 3 evidence per standard, you're now looking, and 24 students, you're looking at 3,888 pieces of evidence. That's for 1 year. Now take that and divide it out by the time. Let's say it takes 20 minutes per piece of evidence to correct. That's 432 hours per trimester. Teachers work 180 days, and there's 3 trimesters. That's 7.2 hours per day to score and enter evidence. Imagine if all that was written work. Middle school English language arts. There are 41 standards. 18 are needed to determine proficiency. You take the 18 standards, probably 3 pieces of evidence. It's 54 pieces. Let's say an average teacher has 65 students. That's 3,510 pieces of evidence. Take that evidence times 20 minutes to assess and enter, and you're now talking 1,170 hours per year. Divided by the 180 teacher workshop days, it's 6.5 hours per day. A teacher contract is only 7 hours. I am thankful that not all evidence is a written piece of paper. How do we motivate our students? Motivation of students is another item we are hearing about. Item 4 in the administrative folder provides an explanation on one path to motivate students using how grades. Another avenue is external and internal motivations. According to Leadership in Action, located in your administrative folder, the basic needs of English, math, science, and history, as well as relevant skills, are all part of proficiency-based learning. What this does not provide is information on various grading systems that would be in the best interest of students. This is a discussion that will be had in the Teaching and Learning Committee next week. If the law had the written rules, which DOE has said cannot be done under the current way the law is written, as it is too inflexible, there might be a clearer understanding of expectations. Since grading systems were left to local control, there have been many, many hours of work in figuring out our use of the 1-to-4 system. LD 1666, an act to delay the use of proficiency-based diplomas by 1 year. Last week there was a workshop. At that workshop there was an amendment made as a motion to repeal the law. We're waiting on further information to come out of Augusta, but that is on the table as we speak. So all this discussion may end up being a moot point as far as the law is concerned. Last week we heard from a lot of people. These are the top 5 comments that we heard about. 1-to-4 versus traditional 0 to 100 grading. Empower, retakes and impact on motivation, communication home, and college admissions. I didn't do a quick count, but I think the topics tonight were the same from the other viewpoint. So where do we go from here? We're following the law, which is to certify that our students are proficient in the 8 content areas and the guiding principles. But what's next? I would welcome any of your questions and direction for us to take next week at the Teaching and Learning Committee.
Thank you, Tina and Sean and the Teaching and Learning Committee. They just had a short time frame since the last meeting was just last week. We'll also be further discussing this at our next meeting on the 19th, but I'm opening this up to the school board for discussion and questions for Tina. Are there any others? Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question per se, just wanted to say on the record that I voted against the procedural motion before because I thought it was more appropriate to hear the presentation and then hear audience comments first so they could address it directly. I just wanted to state that was the reason why I voted against the motion. Thanks.
Any other discussion from the board? Ms. Kordemosh?
Is there any data that supports that 1 through 4 is best practice for grading?
I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Sabat because that's not information that I was provided.
I think as far as data, as far as best practices, about what's research-based, I haven't found any specifically, but I think in your packet, we have put in lots of information. I think in your packet that what the administrators provided to you provides lots of information, and I know folks out there have vilified, if you will, Great Schools Partnership, and I think that's pretty wrong. And there's lots of good agencies out there who have supported the work of proficiency-based learning, including NESAC, the New England schools and colleges that do the high school's accreditation. They fully support that, and that material is in your administrative packet. And it's not just one group's point of view, it is a consortium of groups that support that type of work, and that's in there as well.
Any other discussion or direction from this board for the Learning and Teaching Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee meeting open to the public?
It is open to the public. It's next Monday at 5. However, there will not be any public comment in the committee as we only have an hour before the budget starts for that night.
So then is this the last opportunity tonight to comment on this before a proposal is brought to the full committee?
I have been receiving emails for the last week. My emails is still open. I will present all information come the 12th. But the night of the 12th, there just won't be time for this kind of public comment and us to come out with a recommendation before the 19th.
Thank you.
We don't know what's going to happen on the 19th. There might not even be a motion, so that's the other opportunity. But yes, there's other ways of communication. Folks can certainly email and contact us. Any other discussion or guidance to the Teaching and Learning Committee? See.
Just a rules clarification for those who are emailing the school committee with their testimony that's written. The school committee cannot respond as a whole to that, so we may acknowledge receipt, but we cannot comment on the actual policy due to that being an inappropriate forum and not a public forum. So just a heads up for those who might be reaching out to us in that way.
Any other discussion? All right, I just had one question, and it wasn't presented. I did not see it in the packet, and I've asked it before, and haven't got an answer for it yet. So I don't know if this is something you would be aware of. Maybe Mr. Shabbat would be aware of, but it's something definitely. If you don't want to answer, that's fine. But at least further investigation to it, and that is with special ed and the requirements for graduation on that. We do a fantastic top-notch job here, and I think that's one of the attractive points here at Lewiston and how well we take care of all of our students. But there are certain students that will not fit the graduation requirements that are fit in this criteria, and I don't know how that affects our percentages like it has for many years. And and I'd like to see a comparison to how we compare to other communities. And I know that exists in all communities, but I feel we do an excellent job here, and we attract a lot of folks because of those services, and that's kudos to Lewiston. But that does affect our graduation rate, and it's just a matter of curiosity. It's not just not saying one way or the other, but I'd like to see information on that, if that's at all possible.
I can try to get you that information. However, I will tell you that one of the reasons the DOE suggested language changes to 1666 was because rules cannot be written to benefit our special ed students. One of the suggestions they put forth before the motion to repeal the entire law was levels of proficiency put on the diplomas. So a student can graduate with a high school proficiency and above high school proficiency, or a proficiency at, let's say, a 5th grade level, and that would be put on their diplomas, so that if a student could only read and do the work of a 5th grader, they could still graduate if they met all their other requirements for their IEPs. So that's still up in the air as far as Augusta goes and the law, but I can see about digging up some research to answer how it would compare to other districts.
And I realize that information out there is all over the place, so but I appreciate any work that you may have. I know it may take a while, but it just brought curiosity. I've been asking this question for a while, and
I'm going home and going to sleep after this meeting, okay?
We heard a lot about 1 through 4 and Empower and PBL. Thank you for all that information, and thanks for everybody here. One thing I'm curious, are there any districts that do proficiency-based learning that use the 1 through 100 grading system?
Districts across the state are all doing it different. Some of us are using 1 to 4, some are 0 to 100. Some, like Baxter Academy, is doing symbols. So the grading systems are all over the place. There's no exact science as to what anybody is doing. Am I right? You said no.
So I'm not sure. Is there anybody using 1 through 100?
There are some using 1 through 100. There are some using 1 to 4.
Okay.
There are some using 1 to 10.
Is that something the Teaching and Learning Committee is looking at as well?
At this point, I'm going to interject my own personal opinion. I think everything has to be on the table. We've been talking grading systems and reporting out systems now for 4 years. There is so much more to PBL than just grading systems and reporting systems. And I think we need to find a way to come to a conclusion that this is what we're going to do, this is the reporting system we're going to use, and then we need to start having the conversations around multiple pathways, alternative assessments, and how we're going to bring our special ed kids up to level, and how we're going to allow our smart students that finish standards early to move ahead, because at the moment they can't, and that's one of the benefits of PBL.
Any other discussion from the board? Ms. Ray?
Sorry, I can't stop. I guess this question is more for the administration to understand. Haven't these conversations already happened previously? And so I think it would be great to acknowledge that work that was done and the trajectory that we've already been on. And revisiting is always a good idea to make sure that we're keeping up with the progress and our data's in line. However, why would we duplicate work that was done by a very thoughtful board and I'm sure a very thoughtful administration?
I think with any grading system, we have to look at it constantly. There have been some concerns raised that are legitimate at the high school. We have blended transcripts. Until the class of 2025 gets there, which are this year's 5th graders, there will be blended transcripts starting with the freshman class, because not all electives will have gone into proficiency-based learning unless we make a change to go 1 to 4 across the board instead of phasing in. Those are discussions we have to be having, and we have to be having them honestly and openly to make any progress. And I know Sean had something he wanted to say.
Yeah. I would just like to remind the school committee that 6 weeks ago, you mentioned the administrators, we did an hour and 30-minute presentation to the school committee, where each one of us who are members of the PBL implementation team presented for about, like I just said, an hour and 30 minutes. And the school committee Tina had 2 questions, Luke had 1 clarification, you had 1 about Power School, and I think Renee, you had 2 questions. And then the chair thanked the committee and for the hard work. There was no negative comments, no questions about what's going on, anything like that. And that was just 6 weeks ago. And I also think it's important that the school committee and the general public at large understand that this is not a top-down initiative. Mr. Webster has never told us that we have to do this. This is something that we firmly believe in as administrators of Lewiston Public Schools. All your building principals are here tonight, or were here. And we have worked tirelessly to make this happen. And we have been told, whether directly or indirectly, our opinion no longer matters, because we're not parents. Well, I'm a parent. I have a junior at that high school. We have administrators who are parents. We are just as passionate, care just as deeply about our students and about what's best for our school as anyone else that works in those buildings. And as your administrative team, there are times when the message that gets sent to us is that you don't value our input. Because just 6 weeks ago, there wasn't 1 negative question. Then all of a sudden, everyone maybe have their own personal theories why we're here tonight and why potentially in 2 weeks we're coming up to a vote on changing course, when just 6 weeks ago there wasn't 1 mention of changing course. So it just makes me wonder what's happened. I know for us, and I'll speak for myself, that we think this is what's best for our kids in Lewiston Public Schools. And I think tonight you heard from teachers, from some parents, and from some business community members who also believe in that. I think we need to have the faith and the fortitude to continue to move ahead, see what we've done, could do differently, to compromise and make some changes, but to abandon the ship and say, heck with all the hard work that you heard about tonight, and move in a totally different direction, like Don said, isn't good. And we're sending the wrong message to a lot of hardworking people.
Mr. Chair, I also want to say I've been one of the members of this team that has worked on PBL for the last 4 years. I've worked alongside with most of these people. Never once have I come out and said PBL is a bad thing. But we have to move on. We have to get off the topic of 1 to 4 grading versus 0 to 100 grading. We have to get over Empower versus Power School. There is so much more to PBL that could benefit our children if the conversations we could have are actually part of PBL and not a grading system or reporting system that is not part of PBL. You can do PBL 0 to 100. You can do PBL with the shapes, circle, square, triangle, it doesn't matter. We need to move on, and we need to find out how we give our students multiple pathways, the best opportunity to get ahead in this world, all the skills they need for our employers that are looking to hire students, whether going into college or not. But those are the discussions we should have. A student that finishes sophomore geometry at the beginning of second semester should be able to move on to Algebra 2 under PBL. Currently, they are not. Those are the discussions we need to be having. And it's time we all pull together and get off the subject of grading and reporting systems, come up with a decision, and move forward for our students. This going back and forth time and time and time and time again needs to stop. And that's all I have to say.
We have something from Mr. Jensen here.
Yeah, just to say too, from the school committee perspective, it has been extremely frustrating for us too. I totally understand from your perspective too. From a staff perspective, I work as an ed tech in a system that uses PBL. I use Empower. I have a lot of strong opinions on it. I'm saving them for really when something's actionable. Tonight, we're not actually voting on anything. From a school committee perspective, we've had very few chances to actually vote on things as they relate to PBL. I think the last vote we took related to PBL may have been to about a year ago when we approved Empower, I think, on a continual basis. So we just haven't had the opportunity to even vote on a whole lot of things. So I'll save a lot of my comments for next week. I do like PBL if done right. I think it's much better than the traditional system. In the traditional system, I sometimes consider myself lucky to have graduated high school because there are a lot of opportunities that would have prevented me from doing so. And working with suspended middle and high school students, I see the traditional model as absolutely failing them. And so to go back to the traditional method and leave it at that is not an option for me. However, it doesn't mean what we're doing right now is 100% where we should be. And so I do have some concerns, and I know the school committee here, we're pretty new. I know it was mentioned 6 weeks ago there was a presentation by the administration. There's nothing actionable on there, so I may have reserved some comments because of that. I'm sure other members may have as well. We are a very new committee. I think 3 of us are returning. The rest are new, elected they're taking office in January. So I do get the frustrations, but as a school committee, we do want to be supportive. We want to get everyone's take, and it's not something that we're trying to go above school staff. I know it's frustrating. We're not going to make everybody happy here. Just know that we're not in an easy position either. So I do thank everybody for showing up and that we are having a lot of these conversations. Thank you.
wanted to thank them again. I've said it a few times, but your presentation was partially in part from the public comment that came at the last presentation, and we felt it needed response earlier rather than later. And thank you for everybody who came out to discuss it as well. One of the reasons I brought up the 1 through 100 is because it was brought to my attention. Matter of fact, I think it was Mr. Webster. Do you have any examples of schools you might want to share with the Learning and Teaching Committee as well? I mean, you don't have to discuss it now, but that's where I had heard about it as well. It was a thought, and that's where the idea came from as well. People have mentioned a vote, and I don't know where that's coming from. We are not in any position to vote at this moment. There might be, but that hasn't been brought up to an agenda item yet. But thank you for discussing that. But thanks again for the short time frame you've had to put this together. And I know on the 19th between now and the 19th, we'll be gathering additional information, and you're more than welcome to send us your comments or other people that weren't here as well this evening. So thank you. Any other discussion? Mm-hmm.
I haven't said very much about this. It's very difficult as a new person to come in, and there's been a lot of comment on either side, and I appreciate you having to relive this, because honestly I think people are, and as new members, I think it's important for us to hear all of the information, just because I think Tina's right. I think there are so many other things that we need to focus on. I'm not sure why, there's been a lot of questions and comments from the public about this system, and I think it's only fair that for new people to come in and hear it. And again, I'm sorry you have to go through it again. And for the people who came last week stating their opinion again, we need to hear everything. I don't know that I wasn't, when I first got on here, I didn't know we'd be voting or doing anything different. I just want to support student learning. I think we need to put that first. And I think we need to not be scaring our students. I was very disturbed about some of the stories that I've heard from students who are deathly afraid that they're not going to go to college or they're not sleeping at night for these reasons. We need to talk about how we're helping them. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any others? All right, we'll move on. There's no motion in here. So we'll move on to agenda item number 7, presentations of the fiscal year 2018-19 budget books.
Would you mind just a quick break?
Parliamentarian, can we take a break without a 9 whatever vote? We're good with that? That's not in the book? Okay, we're going to take a short break.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
this mine or yours? That is an extra. Because
Extra.
you've got here two right there. All right, let's repeat what I just said. Moving on to agenda item number 9, a presentation of the fiscal year 2018-19 budget books. Superintendent Bill Webster and Chief Administrative Officer Bobby Avery will present. There's no motion on this, just information. Thank you.
So I will start and then turn over to Bobby. I'd like to you have two books, one with a blue cover and one with a red cover. No, not red, green cover. We're going to start out, this is going to be your primary book, and we're going to start out talking about everything that's in here so you know where to find it. The green book is in a much higher level of detail if you want to go into minutely, but we'll talk about that further. So if you open up the book, you'll first see the budget schedule. So that's just a reminder of when the meetings are. You'll notice that in terms of the budget timeline, the meeting of March 19th no longer shows on the schedule because that's going to be devoted to PBL, and what had been on that schedule got moved to the 21st. Okay?
The entire meeting is being, I'm sorry, can you say that again?
It will be a regular meeting with essentially PBL being the primary, if not the only, but we haven't finalized agenda item or topic. So I won't go into any more detail on that. The next sheet just is an index for the whole book, and we're going to start with tab A. And I'd like to just spend a little time walking you through my budget memo because it does summarize the book and give you some information. It starts out, it talks about what the schedule is leading up to the workshop meeting with the City Council on March 26th at Lewiston High School. Overall, this budget is up expenditure-wise, 7.6% before consideration the new state funding for the new school. And when you put that in there, because it shows up as additional revenue as well as additional expense, it shows a whopping overall budget increase of 11.9%. I mean, and both those numbers are obviously higher than what would be typical. They do reflect a major increase in state funding, which I'll talk about in a little bit. In preparing the book, or when starting the budget process last November, December, we knew that there was going to be the likelihood of a material increase in state funding. We didn't know how much. And I did ask my principals and directors to prepare budgets that they felt would responsibly meet the needs of students. I should not have been surprised, but I was not entirely prepared for the fact that they proposed roughly 100 new positions. And despite the additional revenue, we were $2.5 million above that. And so the last 3 weeks has been trying to prioritize and make those reductions so that we could present you a balanced budget. And as I say in the book on the first page there, I had actually hoped to present you a budget that had, you know, some surplus in it so that the board could pick and choose and add some things without impacting others. And I am sorry that I have not been able to do that in the time allotted. The overall 11.9% increase at the bottom of page 1 is really in 4 critical areas. One is the new school construction, which I've already briefly mentioned. Secondly, the number of new positions. And one of the things that, you know, at some point we always got to pay the piper, and there were 26 positions approved by the school committee last summer that were not in the initial budget. but were added when we got the additional state funding. So they have to show up in the budget for the first time, even though they already exist. And then in addition to that, there are 38 new proposed positions. We have the health insurance benefit increase, and then you can see all other increases, 2.8%. And we've made a 3% general inflation assumption. So I think while the increase in the overall budget is high, I think you can identify pretty quickly the areas that you may want to focus on in terms of why are they high. The second page at the top is a summary financial statement. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but you can see there's a note besides every line that will further explain it. The only one I want to focus on is on the local property taxes. And we had talked a little bit about this, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Reading from note 1, I spoke to the city assessor, and he gave me a rough estimate to use for the assessed real estate value in Lewiston, $1.913 billion, with up very little from the year before, 0.4%. Communities that have significant growth in that area would see a much lower mill rate increase. But if we're going to raise the 20.5 million representing the minimum required local share in adult ed, if I take that, divide it by the assessed value, I get with a 10.76 mill rate, which is, in comparison to 10.19 this year, an increase of 57 cents or 5.6%. Why is this higher than inflation, certainly, and higher than what most, if not all, people were expecting? And as I say here, that I don't think the legislature fully understood what it voted on in the wee hours of July 1st. The state had two options. They could have left the EPS funding formula unchanged and just given more money. Instead, they changed the formula. They gave more money, but in changing the formula, they also increased the minimum required local share. Now, if you're a community or in a community that is already taxing above that, it makes no difference. But in a case like Lewiston, where we have consistently, since I've been here, only funded the minimum required local share, this is what the impact of that is. And I put it in bold letters. In effect, this is a state-mandated increase in local property taxes. And I remember, being in a meeting with some of the legislators that they didn't think it was going to be this significant. Well, now we're seeing the consequences of that. Now, in saying that, it doesn't mean that I don't think that our schools and our students don't need this additional funding. And in this budget process, that will be further presented to you. But, I do recognize that it was not expected. But the consequences of raising less than the minimum required local share, and I mentioned this on the top of page 3, for every dollar that is not raised locally, our state subsidy will be reduced by $3. So it's a pretty significant penalty for Lewiston because the state does indeed fund roughly 75% of our general education budget. There's more information on page 3 about the state subsidy. I just want to draw your attention on page 4. You can see the list of unbudgeted positions that were authorized last year. 26 altogether, and actually, I need to change the title. One of the challenges in this memo is making sure all the edits get done. And then on the next page, you'll see all the proposed new positions. So when you get those presentations by the various principals and department heads, they will talk in more detail about what those additional positions are. One of the things that I want to mention, it's at the top of page 6, and it relates to this, is that those new positions do not include any new additions to building administration, to district administration. And I know that it's common to make the point that increases should be in the classroom. And this budget reflects that. One of the things I do want to point out that I've got in bold there, and this is a new thing that the state has just started computing, and you're going to see it in tab C, but Lewiston commits a higher percentage of funding to the classroom than almost all the other districts in Maine. And I haven't looked at the new law in detail, but it has a 10-year, I think, phase-in of what that percentage on a minimum basis should be. And it starts at something like 61 and goes to 70%, I believe. We're already at 71%. Most districts in Maine are not. Yes. Yeah.
Do I need the microphone for this? Yeah. All of the social workers are at 44.4, except for the Longley one is only at 40. Is that accurate? That one gets paid less than all the rest of them in the entire district?
So one of the things on the budget, and I'm not saying that there wasn't a mistake there. These are assumptions. We're going to hire teachers below them and above them. I'm not exactly sure what that might be, but the 40,020 is a kind of a, I think it's a 5-year, assuming we're hiring a teacher with 5 years of experience. It'll be all over the lot, but that's we can certainly check that. I'm not sure whether that's a mistake or not. Although there's actually a couple of social workers later in Montello. Yeah, and it may be that we're anticipating a social worker that has national board certification that would get that $3,000 stipend, but even then it'd be $1,000 short. It may also be that some of the building administrators may have assumed they're getting they want someone with a little more experience, so that's possible too. But we can compare that and just at least get an answer as to why the difference.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So you mentioned there's no new admin here.
Correct.
So one of the things.
Not that there weren't some requests for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Last year, it came to the board that to get a position to help administer Empower, which was voted, well, did not happen. Did not get put into the future budget, which is partially probably why we've had some glitches. But I've also requested an district art coordinator. Is that because you just didn't want to do any more administration? Is that the concern here?
We added again, this is just a proposal, so anything can happen. We did add a art teacher at Lewiston High School.
Yeah, but that's a teacher. We're talking about admin.
Right. So there was no admin there. In regard to student information system reporting, you will see that down the next to last line, there is a student information system assistant. Right now we have one student information system coordinator, and he is burned out, and irrespective of the reporting system, we need that person there. But other than that, and I don't consider that an administrator position. There is none.
So what would you need from the board to get that put on here?
So,
either one. I mean,
right, and so
saying, one or the other. I mentioned Empower or district art director. I know, being that we just developed the visual and performing arts committee that was discussed there as well, but we need some direction in that department.
So you're going to run into things, no doubt, that you would like to see in the budget. And you also may run into things that you'd like to see eliminated from the budget. What is often more common, though, is that you may want to add something, but you're not quite sure how it would be added. So as we begin to make amendments and adopt the budget, you could very well pass a motion that might have this position needs to be added, and you would charge administration with how to figure out how to fund that. So right now it's a zero-sum game. To add anything, we got to take something out.
Shouldn't we charge you to do that, not administration? That's your job, right?
Well, I wouldn't make the decision unilaterally. I would speak, but yes, you would charge the superintendent to make that adjustment. Correct.
So at some point that needs to come to a vote if we want to add that.
Right, right. And I think in the budget process, and Bobby and I will be taking notes, there may be comments made, geez, there ought to be this or that, or this, why is this there? We'll make those notes, even absent a board vote, and think about it, maybe come back to you with a recommendation, at which point you could actually vote to accept or reject whatever it might be. So when it comes to the arts director, that is not in this budget, and whether that would be a full new position or a stipend position for a present teacher would be another possible way of doing that. But that's something the board could charge us to do.
Do I need to put that to a subcommittee first, or can I just put it on?
No, I think we have not used the subcommittee process on the budget. Not that there aren't certain components that could go through that couldn't go through a subcommittee, but I think that the budget, by and large, is a full board discussion. So if this would be the appropriate place to say, I'd like to have you look at X, Y, Z, if the art director or anything else. So again, we're going to be having presentations on every aspect of the budget, but that could be something.
So it can come up at any time.
Yes.
It doesn't have to come up tonight. I was just
Correct.
curious how the process works.
Yep.
But if I could, but we don't, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to go to a vote. I mean, you guys could throw it in there for further discussion during the budget process, and if and when it's cut, I mean.
Right, because I think that it's going to be important for us to make note of your comments and what you'd like to see or concerns you have, but I think it'd be very difficult, particularly if we're only halfway through the budget review, to know we're going to cut this so we can add that. But we can come back to you with everything we heard and give you some things to actually act upon.
Sure. Yeah, because last year when I was appointed to the board here, it was very frustrating for me because I was very unfamiliar with the budget process, and it felt like we got through the whole process, came to the end, I was ready to make changes, and it was kind of like, that's not the way it works. So I guess as far as for the new members' sake, could we get like clarification about when the proper time is to recommend a change in the budget? Should we wait till a certain point, to the end? Do we do it the same night that it's being presented? I think that would just help us.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is incumbent on Bobby and me to make sure that we have an accurate reflection of questions and concerns and ideas that have come up over the process. And what would be the expectation is it would be during review and revisions. So right now, the first, that's now been moved to March 28th. So I would see on that date, we should be coming back to you with what we heard. And it might have only been one of you voicing it, but we'll try to be respectful of all those comments. And so if we can come with a proposal that we don't recommend doing this, or we do, but we think we need to cut this, and we'll put them all together, and then that would be where the board could vote in mass or individually on whether to make those adjustments. Okay.
If I could, just a suggestion. So on the city council, what we did is throughout the budget process, we would ask, it would be Heather Hunter, but we would ask Bobby to put it on the list. So either addition or deletion. If it's something we want to talk about, we want to talk about further, we would just ask for it to be on the list. So I'm not suggesting that tonight, but maybe you and Bobby could talk about and see how that could work through this process.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to get to the end of the budget cycle and have to deal with everything, including everybody's input, because it's just going to be insane. And what we'll end up doing is either cutting or adding things that really we haven't vetted properly. So I would just throw it on the list, and then we know it's coming, and they can remind us every week, this is on your list, and this is what's going to cost you, or this is what it's saving us. Just a thought.
So we could do an update, not for action, but so that you would know, well, there's been these 5 requests to add, and that's going to add $200,000 to the budget, and we haven't deducted anything or whatever. Yeah. 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 So also in tab A are the copy of the mission and the goals that the board has seen and that are supported by this budget. Tab B is the essential programs and services, the so-called ED 279 report, and there's a cover memo that Bobby wrote that basically lists all the changes from the prior year in terms of how this is computed. We went over this with this board 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. It's the same report because it's the one that they issued at the end of January. But that's there in that tab. And then, Bobby, do you want to, what if you went to the microphone where RJ was sitting? So Bobby's going to talk a little bit about what you're going to find in tab C and going forward.
Okay, so just as a reminder, these 2 books that you have before you actually tie out together. So the working budget, which is in green, in blue, all the detail to this budget in blue, this budget binder in blue, ties out to the green one. So we'll talk about that after. I need a lot of space. Okay, so tab C is the financial and operating statistics, and in the very beginning are the acronyms. And so I know I've heard that some folks don't understand necessarily everything that we talk in this lingo often, and so we've provided you with those acronyms. The next, after the acronyms, is our enrollment, and that's the colored copy. And the very top part of this enrollment is as of March 1st. And it's broken out based, as you can see, based on all of our elementary schools. And then right below that is a breakout for the middle school. Right next to that is a breakout for the high school, for Star Academy, and Lewiston Academy. And then to the right of that, it reflects our outplaced students and students that attend the Dingley School. And then to the right of that is our total enrollment. And again, this is as of 3/1. The projection for enrollment is right below that. And so if you go all the way to the far right, it's a very simple math problem. All you need to do is take the total enrollment, which is projected, and subtract from up above the total enrollment, and that gives you what our best guess of what our student count will be for the next fiscal year.
So if I could just interject here, because these numbers will differ a little bit from what went to the Facilities Committee today. And this is something that Sue Turgeon had done. You'll notice that the second grade class of 411 this year becomes the third grade class at 411 the next year. And that methodology was used in here, so there's no adjustment for dropouts or other thing, where the stuff that went to the Facilities Committee does have that calculation. I just wanted to mention that.
So the next page, you'll find a comparison and I actually chose different school districts that we've used in the past, and it's really comparing based on article, and so it's the 11 articles, how we fare in regards to the school districts that you see before us, based on a cost per pupil basis. This information comes directly from the Department of Education. It comes from their data warehouse, and you can see down below the sources. If you're interested in going there, you can pull it from these sources below, including enrollment numbers. And it's for the latest data available, which is the 2015-16 school year. You'll notice that Lewiston Public Schools, we are highlighted in gray. And what I do when I look at this is I take each article, so Article 1 is regular instruction, and I look to see what the per pupil expenditure cost is for Lewiston as it compares to, and we can use Bangor. I'm just pulling that one right out of a hat. You can see that we spend $4,217 per cost per pupil versus Bangor's $4,970. And then and you can do that for each article. And then all the way to the far right, you'll notice that there's the total cost per pupil for all 11 categories. And so you'll see that Lewiston is $11,497 per pupil. So it's a good benchmarking resource to utilize to see how we're doing. The next schedule, this comes from the Department of Education, and this really depicts how we're doing in comparison to all the other school systems in the state of Maine as it relates to instructional costs versus non-instructional costs. And you'll notice that it's broken out based on article, and the Department of Education defines instructional costs as articles 1 through 4. And then non-instructional costs are all other articles. And you'll notice that Lewiston, so we're number 3 on the list. If you go 3 down, you'll notice that we spend 71.57% of our budget on instructional related costs. There's many other pages that go along with this. There are all the other school districts in the state. If you're interested in them, I can get that for you. Any questions on that one? Okay. Going to tab D, that's school and department handouts. So when the building administrators and the department directors present their budget, this is where you're going to put those. Is right in here, and they should, I believe they're coming to you 3-hole punched. Yep, so you'll have that, and very convenient. Tab E is the summary budget and articles. So this is the 2-page summary budget. It explains the revenues at the top and all of the expenditures at the bottom, broken out based on article. These include adult education as well. know you're just kind of getting this, but is there any question on this? Okay. The next page is the general fund broken out based on object code report, and you'll notice at the top it's all salaries. In the middle, lines 8 through 12, it's our benefits and fringe. Then there's a summary for total salary and benefits, so you can see how much we're spending for salary and benefits and the change based on the 19 budget, the recommended budget, versus the 18 adopted budget. And then line items number 13 through 39 are all the other things that are outside of salaries and benefits.
So if I could just interject here in a couple things. I think one of the challenges, particularly for new school committee members, is that when you approve a budget, it is by state-mandated, state-defined articles. So when it comes to a question like, how much did utilities go up? If you try to look on that on an article basis, you go crazy because, well, utilities might not be a good example, but supplies, for example. So this schedule that Bobby just talked about, it summarizes across all articles by these major accounts. And so it's just a good thing to look at and kind of give you a sense of where are the increases happening, and then you can look at an individual article. So that's, and it's going to be, it's also a little bit of a challenge in the budget presentations, because when a principal makes his presentation or her presentation, they're talking about expenses that cross multiple articles. And so that's, again, one of the challenges as to how best to present it. And I meant to mention that it's not going to be so much of a help this year, but I'm very excited about what Bobby can bring to this process another year, having had great experience in other districts, and they do some things quite differently than what we do here. So what we're using the methodology that was used in recent years here, but I suspect with your input and what we learned from this process and Bobby's observations, that we'll make some improvements next year. It's not going to help us this year, but it will get us in the right direction.
Bobby, could I just ask, on the general, it's punched out, object code summary, in the two right columns, could you add that that's the dollar change and percent change from the FY18 adopted budget to the FY19 recommended budget, just for when the public's looking at it? I think that, yes, if that's true. It is true. Well, inverse. Yep. So it's the FY19 recommended budget versus the FY18 adopted budget? Yeah. I also want to add
If I may just, because I thought it might be good just to compare the Blue Book in the green book, just on the that first page. So ELL K6 Farwell. If you turn to your green book and also flip to that first page, and we ended up putting in several books so you can line them up side by side. And if I'm looking at ELL K6 Farwell in the blue book, I see under salary, it's up 93.5%. And you might wonder why. And if I look at the green book, I can see new ELL teacher Farwell. And you can also see that on my budget memo. So this is why if you see something that doesn't make sense or want to get more detail, if you look at the detail book, any position like that would be labeled as new.
And so the remaining tabs are all the rest of your articles. And that covers that binder. And we just went over the detailed binder. That's basically the gist of it throughout so it's all tabs based on your articles. And the same concept that Bill just went over for Article 1 applies for all the other articles as well. Any questions? Is it enough to take in? A lot of homework. It's fun work, though. It's good work. I'd like to make a comment so that this committee knows that the budget memo that Bill prepared or prepares year after year, it's excellent. It's a wealth of information for you. It really does summarize the budget document. It's very helpful. It's a good resource. So I'd like to thank Bill for that. It's a good job.
Under the school committee section, so I'm on there's no page number.
What tab?
6. 4 pages before 7. I'm in blue. You're on the first place on page 6. Yep. Oh yeah, it is the first page of 6, okay. What are the contracted services? $65,000.
I assume that's legal and audit?
I'm just guessing. That's what I assumed it was too. I just wanted to check. And then the PNC insurance is up 37.1%.
I can speak specifically to the insurance.
Okay.
Over the last couple of years, and we could go into more details in probably an executive session, but there have been a couple of payouts that have impacted our premium.
And then supplies, general, is up 487%.
Well, the total amount is $2,400, and that includes the meals like you had today.
Okay. Okay, that was my only question.
Yeah, it's a good comment. I just want to say I'm very impressed with the way this looks. I put a lot of focus on the budget, so I'm very, very excited to go through this, do some homework, and yeah, I'm very excited about this budget season. So great job, you guys. Thank you.
If Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
If I could just to Luke's comment, we've had some really hard working folks in this building working on this document. So I just want you to know, all of you to know, they've worked tirelessly to get this done. So we're really lucky to have them.
And on top of that, much of our administration wear many hats in this building, and from their experience as well from many years. So really appreciate that. And as a school committee, our responsibility is to Bill, and this is one of his criteria, probably the biggest criteria when you hire a superintendent, is to overlook and to create a budget, and as well as Miss Avery over here. So thank you for putting it together. It's never easy, right? It's never easy, but it's we're appreciative of how you put it together. So we look forward to the rest of the process. Anybody else? All right, thank you for the review. All right, item number 8, motion to enter into an executive session to discuss a personal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056A.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Hutchinson, seconded by Jensen. Assistant Superintendent Shabbat will present. We are in executive session, so. Oh, yeah, we have to vote. Who does not want to go into this executive session? Nobody's voting on that one. Okay, all those in favor of executive session? It's unanimous. We are now officially into